Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
You bet.
What condition are these prisoners in, and what do we know about what happened to them in captivity?
Well, they're receiving detailed medical attention and have since they were wheels up from North Korea, but all of them were in such good spirits to be able to have an opportunity to visit with them on the tarmac after the President and the First Lady brought them out of the plane was deeply moving to Karen and me, and to have a few words with them, to hear their expressions of support for the President, their gratitude to the country, their gratitude for the prayers of the American people. I'll remember the rest of my life. But you know, it really was a moment, Margaret, that I believe is a result of a change in policy and a change in leadership here in the United States of America. It was just a few days after the inauguration in 2017 that President Trump initiated a policy of abandoning the era of strategic patience with North Korea and adopting a new policy to bring economic and diplomatic pressure to bear to achieve what the world had failed to achieve for more than 2 decades, the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And tonight on the tarmac at Andrews Air Force Base, I think we saw a hopeful sign that this time it might be different. We very much appreciate the statements and the efforts that Kim Jong-un has made so far to move us toward the path to peace.
And you've been involved behind the scenes in strategizing for this summit between Kim Jong-un and President Trump. What does the release actually signify to you, though, about Kim's willingness to negotiate away his nuclear arsenal?
Well, when you look at the agreed framework of the Clinton administration, when you look at the 6-party talks of the Bush administration, there was a fairly consistent pattern, Margaret, when negotiations for denuclearization of North Korea failed in the past. And that was that the parties came together, promises were made, and then promises were broken. But the promises weren't made by North Korea until there were concessions, until there were resources made available.
And you don't see this summit as a concession?
Well, what I see is when the South Koreans came with the request for a meeting and said that Kim Jong-un had said he was prepared to suspend ballistic missile testing, suspend nuclear testing, not object to American military exercises, and was requesting a summit. I was sitting next to the President when virtually on the spot he said, yes, we'll do it. And it's because I think the President senses an opening that may result in a historic agreement. As the President often says, we'll see. But it is accurate to say that North Korea has taken steps so far, made commitments so far, and making it possible for these 3 Americans to come home before there were any concessions even offered by the United States or our allies. Gives us hope this may be different.
You've been speaking with the Secretary of State who has been on the ground in Pyongyang. In this meeting, were there any new concessions made, any promises made about what Kim will actually do with his nuclear program? What
Kim Jong-un has said publicly and in discussions is that he is prepared to negotiate to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Those words are important, but we'll see what they mean. And I do believe that when the summit comes about in the not distant future, that President Trump will go in with the attitude of trying to determine what the intentions of the North Koreans are, but in the same moment he'll be making very clear that we're not going to make the mistakes of the past, that the United States of America will stay on the path that brought us to this point. President Trump changed the direction of North Korea, changed the entire direction of the Asian Pacific with regard to this threat when he abandoned strategic patience, brought our allies together, brought China in an unprecedented way. And we believe all of that in combination has brought us to the point where we have a real opportunity for a breakthrough. But the President he'll assess that at the moment in the time, but we really believe it's significant. Not only is it's a great day in America to see 3 Americans freed from captivity in North Korea, but we also think it continues to support that this may be a real opportunity for a historic peace.
You spoke with the family of Otto Warmbier, the UVA student who wasn't so fortunate and died shortly after he was released from captivity. What did you say to his parents when you spoke to him yesterday?
Well, President Trump called the Warmbiers over the weekend, and when news broke that the Secretary of State was coming home with our 3 Americans, I felt compelled to call them as well and simply let them know that while we received this news with joy, that Otto was on all of our hearts and their family was in our prayers. I mean, that we got Otto home last year, but it wasn't soon enough, and we lost him. And their family has been so brave and so courageous, standing up for the truth of what happened to their son, but the need for real progress on the Korean Peninsula. As you know, Fred Warmbier traveled with us when we went to the Olympics. He met with defectors. He has taken the pain and suffering and loss of that family, and they have turned it into a platform to advocate for justice on the Korean Peninsula, and they have our deep respect.
There are also other families suffering. In Iran, at least 4 American prisoners are still being held there.
That's right.
One of their family members was at the White House yesterday. Is the Trump administration open to a prisoner swap?
I believe we are always interested in opportunities to bring Americans home,
and that means talking to Iran right now about doing that?
Well, I think we sent a pretty strong message to Iran this week when the president made the decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
And that's why the families are worried that their family members may be held hostage now to this diplomacy that's been torn up.
Well, we actually believe that by withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, we've not stepped back from leadership in the region, but rather President Trump is providing new and renewed leadership. This was a deeply flawed agreement that did nothing to check the support for terrorism and malign activities of Iran, did nothing to check the ballistic missile ambitions. In fact, the agreement would lapse in 7 years, Margaret, and after 7 years, Iran would have no limitation on its ability to develop nuclear weapons. What President Trump is speaking with our allies about, and met with President Macron, spoke to Prime Minister May, Angela Merkel was in, the Chancellor of Germany, is we felt it was important to withdraw from this deeply flawed Iran nuclear deal, but now we're engaging
on the prisoners.
The possibility of a new deal, which may create opportunities for not only addressing issues of Americans that are detained in Iran, but also checking the extraordinary malign influence and support for terrorism that Iran continues to propagate across the region.
Overnight, Iranian forces fired on Israeli troops. Israel has now carried out airstrikes. Did you expect that exiting the deal would have this kind of escalation?
Well, we've been anticipating the potential for some Iranian reaction since airstrikes that took place a couple of weeks ago against Iranian sites in Syria. And we're monitoring it very closely. We stand by Israel's right of self-defense to protect its nation, its people, and its sovereignty. But make no mistake about it, the Iran nuclear deal that allowed $150 billion to be returned, $1.8 billion in cash, the fact that the deal didn't check the aggressive influence of Iran across the region is exactly why Iran is in Syria. It's exactly why you have Iranian forces and Iranian missiles that have positioned in Syria as that nation has been swept up into a bloody civil war. And the president's leadership with regard to the Iran nuclear deal, we believe, sets our nation and the region on a different course that gives us the opportunity working with our allies, not just Israel, but Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, all of whom expressed support for us withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal.
And you don't
the
think this
opportunity for a
damages
new
the
coalition
diplomacy
that
of
will
North
check the malign activities of Iran and prevent the kind of violence that we saw in the last 24 hours.
And you don't think that hurts your diplomacy with North Korea?
President Trump believes in peace through strength. And by withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, he's made it clear to the world stage that we will not enter into a deeply flawed agreement that does not achieve the objectives that we've stated. The truth is, the Iran nuclear deal only delayed the ability for Iran to obtain nuclear weapons. I fully expect that as the North Korean leadership looks at the president's decision, they'll see two things. Number one, they'll see that he's a man of his word. He told the American people that he thought the Iranian nuclear deal was a disaster and we should withdraw. He kept his word, just as in other international commitments that the prior administration had made.
But not America's
But the other is, I think the message they'll receive is, if we do a deal for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, that not only will the president keep his word, but he is going to hold out for a deal that really achieves the objective that has eluded the world for more than a quarter of a century. And that is peace on the peninsula, no more nuclear weapons, and no more threatening of our allies and neighbors in the Asia Pacific.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Margaret.